Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this program today, we will be examining what God is doing in the Middle East regarding the persecuted church and the miracles that are taking place through the assistance of the incredible ministry that is Help the Persecuted. Warm welcome. We have two special guests. One of them is from Atlanta, Georgia in the United States, and the other one is from Dorset in England. And my special guest on today's program is Joshua Yousef, who's the president of Help the Persecuted, together with Tim Osmond, who's the UK ambassador for Help the Persecuted. So, gentlemen, warm welcome to the Middle East Report, and it's great to have you back on the program, Joshua. But we will be unpacking the incredible way that God is working so powerfully in the Middle East, and certainly what he is doing with your ministry, Help the Persecuted, is just absolutely extraordinary. But for our viewers, can you just remind ourselves a little bit of the vision behind Help the Persecuted?
Yeah, I mean, it really birthed out of a broadcast ministry that my father and I, Michael Yousef, created in the Middle East. We built up a follow-up team, a network of people, of pastors who would follow up with listeners and viewers. And many of them were coming to us and saying, hey, we're dealing with very difficult and challenging social problems as a result of people coming to Christ from Islam. And so that's when we started this fund called Help the Persecuted, which is now a standalone, separate organization with nearly 40 people across the whole Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia, handling specific cases of persecution.
Excellent. And Tim, it's great to have you back on the program. And I wonder if you can remind our viewers of your role within Help the Persecuted and why it's so important that there is a UK branch of Help the Persecuted.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. It's always an honour to be invited back on, and especially with Josh as well. Well, going back a little bit, as we heard from Josh, that his father had a ministry called Leading the Way, and I got involved in organising some events in London and got to meet who is our now Vice President, Alan Guinan. And together we put on some events, and that was just before Alan and Josh took Help the Persecuted to a standalone ministry charity. And me and my wife Marika, we helped them launch in Notting Hill in 2019. It was shortly after that Josh and Alan asked me to head up Help the Persecuted in the UK. So, and that was 4 years ago. So it's been an extraordinary journey, Simon, since then, and God has done amazing things in the UK and more to come.
Amazing, yeah. The growth, your personal spiritual growth through Help the Persecuted has been incredible as well. So it's just fabulous what Help the Persecuted is actually doing. And Joshua, we know that the Middle East, particularly our viewers watching, we know the Middle East is one of the most precarious and dangerous regions of the world. We see that, for example, violence, extreme violence in many cases, and Islamic extremism play a massive part in the region. But on reflection, how do you actually view the Middle East as a region? Because I think it's important to deal with all the strategic challenges, all the kind of violent ideologies that run through the region. Yeah,
it's important. I mean, it's the birthplace of our Lord. And I believe that he has a heart for the globe, for the world. But I also think there's a special place in the Lord's heart for the Middle East, and the fact that the church started here in that part of the world. We are seeing a great challenge. The church is facing a great challenge in that part of the world, as it did 1,400 years ago. But in spite of those challenges, in spite of the persecution, we're also seeing the growth of the church, the growth of God's kingdom as a result of this persecution in that part of the world. And we're seeing it in places that I never thought I'd ever see. I mean, if you had told me that that Saudi Arabia would allow a church, to come in. Now it's got some issues that they're having to deal with, but there are things happening in the region, in the Middle East, that I would never have thought in my lifetime we would have seen.
And can you just unpack some of the incredible miracles that we're seeing? How many Muslims are coming to faith because of dreams and visions throughout the region? Because I think this really does show that the move of God is moving so powerfully in this region that so many are coming to faith.
The first incident that we have of a Muslim having a dream of Jesus is in the late 1800s. There's a story of an imam who had a dream or vision of Jesus. But what we've seen over the last 30 or 40 years is exponentially more. I gave this example recently. There's a satellite channel in the Muslim world that could get around 800,000 contacts a month. And they're saying somewhere between 60 and 70% of people who contact their ministry are claiming to have had a dream or vision of Jesus. And that ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's 30%, sometimes it's 40, 50, 60%. But it's significant enough to where we know that we did not see this 40 years ago. And so that is, I think, the result of that is persecution, because communities and families are not responding positively to those conversions.
And Tim, share with us how the Middle East really has changed ever since the war in Iraq in 2003, where we've seen the kind of rise of Islamic extremism across the Arab world, and then we've seen the rise of ISIS in the past decade that caused devastation and mayhem to those ancient Christian communities. And share with us the impact that this has had on those ancient Christian communities in the Middle East that are thousands of years old.
Well, it was devastating. And as we saw, unfolding on the news, that the ISIS just stormed through many of the Christian communities in Iraq, and and we have the contacts. We had a ministry centre up in a place called Karakosh on the Niver Plain, and Mosul and Erbil, all those places, where they had the largest concentration of Christians in the whole of Iraq. And I attribute that to Jonah, going and, God getting hold of him. But, they were displaced, so many of them, where you would have a neighbour that would just join up with ISIS and hand them in, basically. People that they had grown up with for so many years. So what happened, they pushed them out, but now what we're seeing is over the last, when ISIS got, pushed right back, basically, we've been seeing the Christians starting to come back tentatively because they're wary of their neighbour, quite rightly so. They're coming back to the devastation of their houses are just, burnt, and they're having to restore that. We actually helped to restore quite a few houses in the Karakosh area, and help the families that were coming back, and help to rebuild that town. But that's what we're seeing at the moment, coming back. But I think God is moving big time across Iraq. Although we know that ISIS is on the rise again, and you've got radical extremism in North Syria. You've got all different ones up there, and it's difficult to know really who's who, basically, and which side they're on. But it's very encouraging to see Christians again establishing. And it goes back to what God said. He said, I'll build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And that's what we're seeing as Amen. A ministry.
That's incredible. And Joshua, it's been a privilege hosting you guys ever since you launched Help the Persecuted back in 2009, particularly to be able to help Tim as well by doing programs and creating awareness of the incredible work that you're doing to help the persecuted Christians across the Middle East. But the growth in the way that you've been able to help the persecuted church in the Middle East is incredible, because Tim sent me the notes. So we've seen that the development of your ministry has helped persecuted Christians from the year 2021 to 2022. You managed to help 47,000 people, and then from 22 to 23 you've been able to help 74,000 people in the Middle East. Share with us how God is just impacting the incredible work that you guys are doing.
You know, I was telling someone recently, when we first launched in 2019, we really launched in 18, but in 2019 Vice President Pence spoke at our inaugural event, and I stood up there and said, we're going to help 10,000 persecuted Christians this year, you know, and that seemed like such a huge number. I said, we don't have the staff, we don't have the money. And so now I look back on this year and I think 74,000, it's almost unimaginable for me to have come this far over the last 5 years. And it really is the strength of our team. I mean, they are some of the most courageous, the most initiating people, and God's really called them to this, to go out and actually like really find people who have come to faith and are suffering because of their faith, and take the initiative to actually help them. Because there is a penalty, by the way, for helping a convert. It's not just the convert that faces this consequence of conversion. Anyone who aids or abets or helps a convert should, under Sharia, experience the same repercussions as the person who converted. So these are very courageous people that we work with.
No, it's amazing. I've met them as well, very special people. And Tim, you've seen for your own eyes some of the projects that Joshua has actually been involved in with Help the Persecuted. What was your experience when you actually meet the people? Because I know a few years ago you went to the refugee camp in Jordan. Share what it's like to actually meet these persecuted Christians and knowing that Help the Persecuted has made a huge difference in their lives.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I mean, first trip that we went out, me and Marika, was to our head office in Jordan. And we went out and actually sat with some of the persecuted Christians that had been ousted from their homes and their towns by ISIS, and had come down into Jordan, and they were in safe houses, so I put them into safe houses. And if you come out of the refugee camps, you basically lose any status. So you cannot get any medical help, you can't get a job, you know. And basically these guys have found their way to a church, and they've been connected with Help the Persecuted. And we'd obviously, like with everything, everyone's a case, you know, so we are very mindful, and we always ask God for wisdom of who we're looking after. And it was so amazing just to go in and sit on the floor, just on cushions on the floor, and hear their story of how they had to flee and leave absolutely everything, you know. And there they're waiting for an opportunity to work or to actually get asylum into a different country. So we heard amazing stories after stories. We heard of a Druze family who came to Jesus, you know, and we had 2 women that were working within that community. And she said, before I gave my life to Jesus, I saw these 2 women walk towards me, and I only saw them as 2 lights. I didn't see them as 2 women. And it was the day she gave her life to the Lord. And her father was the head of the Druze community, you know, and her daughter, Mimi, who was 3 years old, and, you know, came to her and her dad and said, Mummy and Daddy, do you know that Jesus died for us and he rose again and he's coming back, okay, to take us to be with him, and the beast is going to get locked up?
And that's from a 3-year-old?
This is from a 3-year-old. And so God is working, you know, in just the most amazing, miraculous ways throughout the communities in the Middle East. And it's so wonderful to be connected with that and to hear so many more stories, you know, over there, and also going to Lebanon last July, with Josh and some of the other team, and actually see and hear from them over there of how we've helped them to get back on their feet and to be self-sufficient, you know, and because they've lost everything. You know, and there's that verse in the Bible where Jesus says, if you give up your mother and your father and your brother and your sister, okay, and your lands for me, okay, you will be given 10 times an eternal life, you know. And most of the quotes from these guys, there's one here I had, you know, from Mustafa. He said, I will never leave Jesus. That is why I'm in the water today. And he got baptized, you know, after horrendous persecution from his family. So this is what we're seeing in many, many stories. I mean, there's, you know, we could be here, you know, for hours talking about the miraculous.
Amazing,
you know,
amazing. And Joshua, share how the persecuted respond to the horrendous earthquakes that we saw in Turkey and Syria back on the 6th of February 2023 that killed 50,000 people and a further 100,000 were injured.
Well, when you're a minority within a Christian minority within a majority Muslim context, when a natural disaster like an earthquake hits, you are oftentimes the last to receive aid. And then you take that not just in Turkey, but in Syria, where the Syrians were not allowing a lot of NGOs to come into Syria, it compounded the problem even further. And so our team were allowed to go into Syria and allowed to give support and aid to a population that was the last on the list. And so they went into churches, they went in and actually helped and met the need of the people who really were the most vulnerable.
Amazing. So let's have a look at how the Help the Persecuted has been able to help with the horrendous situation in both Turkey and Syria with the horrendous earthquake known as the Syrian earthquake in Aleppo.
The earthquake that rattled the Syria-Turkey border devastated areas that were already in ruin, crushed by the heavy burdens of war, poverty and trauma. Persecuted Christians who were struggling to survive before the disaster have been hit with yet another catastrophic wave of suffering. Help the Persecuted's field ministry team immediately jumped into action, focusing on the undeserved and hard-to-reach areas of Syria, providing food, water, shelter and heat, and forming a pastoral care team focused on caring for grieving and traumatized believers and sharing the gospel with others. Their regional director is Samar.
The team of HTP tonight is visiting a shelter in the city of Aleppo. What we really see is the way the people are living. If you look around me, this shelter is a school. And in this school, like each family is living by themselves on the floor. As I don't know if you can see the picture, they are living just a mattress on the floor and it's freezing. It's something that no human being can stand. Talking to the man and his wife, they shared with me that they are 18 members, their daughters with their kids, and they all stay in this small room sleeping together. They said the first night when the earthquake happened, they spent 2 nights sleeping on the roads. And after that, they tried to find a place to sleep. They ended up in this area. What we see here is something no human being should live. We are doing, HTP and the team, we're doing all what we can to help them. We gathered some clothes, as you see, for the kids, for the teenagers. We got some coats, we got food to help the church that is neighboring this shelter. We're doing everything we can do, but the people are really suffering so much. May God bless you, and please help us so we can reach them and give more and more help to them.
And Help the Persecuted has already helped thousands of people, being the hands and feet of Jesus to those in desperate need. To find out more, go to htp.org.
And of course, we're all incredibly moved by that horrific earthquake that took place in both Turkey and Syria back in February of this year. And it may be a few months since that actually happened, but they still very much need our help, and it's great that Help the Persecuted is making a big difference there. And Tim, we know that this was absolutely horrific. I mean, 50,000 people lost their lives in that earthquake, 100,000 people injured, loss of homes and businesses and families. I mean, the devastation was horrendous, but on top of that, you have the situation of over a decade of the Syrian civil war. Share with us how the earthquake God was able to use as a way of actually getting into kind of Syria and Aleppo, and because the urgent need for relief, aid and help gave an opening to Help the Persecuted to come into Syria.
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, as we heard, that it was very difficult to get anything into Syria, but because we have teams on the ground, and we had a team already in Aleppo, we were able to give funds directly to help, you know, with immediate urgent requirements, you know. And we had people, they were sleeping on the ground because they were in -4, because they were so frightened to go back into their homes, understandably. You know, you didn't want their home just to collapse on them, or they were sleeping in their cars. So we actually funded into the local church there and just said, you know, get what you need, emergency supplies, you know, the basics, basically water, blankets, you know, and food, just any medical help, just to help them immediately. So that was with the team, and then we mobilised a bigger team, which came in from Jordan and Iraq and Lebanon to actually help them. You know, so we had a much bigger team there to help, and they stayed for many weeks. You know, and it goes from, you know, the vital necessities into trauma, the traumatic experience that they've been through, not only because of this war that's been raging for, you know, so many years, but then this is like it's just to top it off. You know, they're just almost about to give up, you know. And I mean, our team had been in there literally a few months beforehand, before Christmas, giving out these emergency relief parcels, you know, and the Christians, they just had to come and get them, but they didn't have the strength to carry them back. You know, and then this happens, you know, just in February. And so now the team is still there, and they've been trying to rebuild, repair, whatever they can in terms of being allowed to let some of them go back and live a normal life. You know, and as you can imagine, after the earthquake, there's nowhere to go to have a wash. You know, things you don't think about, you know, after that, and to minister to them, you know, just to have the basic necessities that we take for granted over here. So the team has been great, and I think, going back to your question, it's the fact that God has opened up these opportunities so we can go in and we administer to not only just persecuted Christians, but everyone that needs help, you know. And so there we share the gospel with them. We're the hands and feet, and they say, "Who are you? You know, you're just showing us so much love." And then the team are able to then pray with them, to share the gospel, and they give their lives to the Lord, you know. So that's how God works, you know, and He's done it in so many places around the Middle East, where because we've got the teams on the ground. And that's the most vital part, isn't it, Josh, is that we have indigenous teams that speak the language. They can instantly react to anything that goes on in the Middle East, where other nations, other organisations can't get in the door. It's not allowed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Josh, I think of all the Christian NGOs dealing with the persecuted church or emergencies, Help the Persecuted does extremely well when it comes to crisis management. And maybe that's your own expertise, because last year you unpacked how Help the Persecuted did an incredible job in helping Afghans escape the Taliban, and the planes you put on as well, and that emergency crisis. Here we have another kind of emergency crisis in both Syria and Turkey. Just explain to our viewers logistically how you set up your ministry for times of crisis like this, and to respond so quickly and so efficiently.
Well, nobody wants to be the person who's responsible for crisis cleanup, but the Lord has called us into this, and I said this earlier, it really is our team. Our team look at it in terms of, there's a sense of urgency with each team member, but there's also not just a humanitarian sense of urgency, there's a gospel sense of urgency, and all of them see when a crisis happens, they immediately start thinking, how can I get the gospel to these people at this point of time in their point of need, and nobody. I mean, people are ready to hear the gospel when things are bad, and that's an unfortunate thing. That's human nature, and so our team look at this both at a humanitarian and at a kind of a kingdom mindset.
Wonderful. And Tim, just explain another major crisis that happened in 2023 this year, and it's only the summer of 2023 now, and that's the crisis in Sudan, which is now on the verge of a potential civil war. Explain how Help the Persecuted were able to help the Sudanese refugees there in Egypt.
Well, as I said before, you know, God works in just strange ways, and you never know what's going to come up next. You know, no one could have foreseen this, you know, like with the earthquake. But we were able to put a team together, our team from Egypt, and we had another guy that came from our head office in Jordan to help oversee some of it. And they mobilized the team, set up in Aswan, and basically then went down every day to the border, and just miraculously the people said, why aren't you charging us? You know, everyone else asks for money, but you're not asking for money. You know, and they're going around and say, come over here, come over here. You know, these guys are doing it for love, for free, you know, and hands and feet of Jesus again. That's where Jesus would be. He would be right in the middle of it, you know, helping. And sharing the love, you know, and then when they start asking questions, you can then share the love of Jesus and the gospel. As Josh said, it's the gospel which is the most important thing, and helping a flourishing church in the Middle East. We don't want the church to be shut down, and God won't allow it to be shut down. You know, so we had amazing miracles of people who had just lost everything, and they had no hope, and they said, who is going to help rebuild our lives? And they said, your hope is only in Jesus Christ. You know, and it was just, and we had medical. We had a doctor there, you know, giving medical help for free, and you know, I think you'll see on one of the videos her comments basically on that. But it was absolutely, and to date, I must get this in. To date, they helped over 5,000 people.
Amazing.
Yeah, 5,000 people.
Yeah, so let's have a look at that video that Tim was speaking about, looking at how Help the Persecuted has been able to help those Sudanese people fleeing the terror in Sudan.
As thousands continue to flee the conflict in Sudan, Christian charity Help the Persecuted has provided vital support to more than 1,000 refugees who've crossed the border into Egypt. The field ministry team set up a medical centre at a bus station near the city of Aswan, while also providing food, drink, Christian literature and spiritual support. Some of their team took great risks to serve as they faced continued persecution for their Christian faith. However, the charity's Daniel Chwai says they are fearlessly helping people arriving in Egypt in desperate need.
They were devoted to helping the Sudanese are coming through despite the fear and despite, you know, being threatened and being persecuted.
Team Dr. Samir explains how word has spread quickly about the warm welcome and help they're providing.
People tell each other, go to this group. They are caring people, they are helping people without anything, and they are very thankful, very grateful to everyone go. Even Egyptian people here in the station tell each other, go this place, go this place. There is people helping without anything. They only help for God.
And Daniel says they've used every opportunity to share the hope of Christ with many broken lives.
I remember a lady that shared, I lost everything. All that is left is broken. And who can fix my soul? That was something that we could share and say that Jesus Christ will. Jesus Christ will fix your soul.
And Help the Persecuted will continue to stand with the many hundreds of people arriving into Egypt in search of a new life. And to find out more, go to htp.org.
And it's great to see how Help the Persecuted is really making a big difference for the Sudanese refugees in Egypt. Can you also share with us, according to my notes here, for example, you've been able to provide 30 safe houses, safe houses for 30 Sudanese who have given their lives to the Lord in this crisis. Share with us how important it is to have safe houses where people can go and recuperate from all the horrific drama that they've seen, in this case a coup and then almost the onset of a civil war in Sudan.
Yeah, I mean the Safe House ministry for us, I can remember when we got our first safe house, and we didn't even call it a safe house. I think it was just somebody needed a place to live that was being chased by their family members, and it's really grown out of that into a more structured process for us, where we have to be very careful about how we acquire those and how we advertise those or not advertise those. And a lot of time, in some cases, we have to move people from safe house to safe house. We've had family members in, I can say the country because they're not in that country anymore, but they were from Yemen, where the Yemeni family chased them into the neighboring country. And they discovered where they were, and we actually had to move them and actually close that whole safe house down, because at that point it had been compromised. And so we've really adapted this whole model based on learning the hard way. In one country, we actually had the secret police raid one. In another country, we actually had terrorists infiltrate one. And so we've had to really develop a really robust process of how we safe house, particularly converts, people who've left Islam.
Yeah, and also, can you share with us, Joshua, the importance of this incredible project in Lebanon called Seeds of Hope? And I think this is incredible because what you're doing there is not only making a difference in the lives of believers in Lebanon, but also then making lives for ordinary Lebanese, that life is so difficult for them with high inflation and high food costs, that you've actually built a farm for them. Share with us this incredible project called Seeds of Hope.
It is so challenging for me to explain to people in the West what is happening in Lebanon. I mean, prior to COVID, I was getting 1,300 lira to the dollar. The currency after COVID was devalued 20 times. So we were seeing, 30 to 40,000 lira to the dollar. Just in the last 12 months, we've gone to 130,000 lira to the dollar. It's been devalued 100 times. There are banks with no money in them. There's $4 billion in treasury that is missing, presumably by corrupt politicians who have taken it. And so people are starving. I had a man walk up to me and said, if it weren't for you, I would have starved. And so my team came up with this idea of creating a farm. And they put these polytunnels up, and they began growing fruit and veg year-round, even in the winter. And we're looking at 26 to 30 truckloads of that vegetable and fruit that goes out into the vulnerable populations in Lebanon each month. It's already catastrophic. It could get worse if we don't see more done. And so I'm just so proud of our team for stepping up and rising to the occasion, to the challenge.
Amazing. So let's have a look at this incredible farm in Lebanon called Seeds of Hope, and the difference it is making in not only the Christian communities in Lebanon, but also the Muslim communities as well.
As winter kicks in and the people of Lebanon continue to feel the bite of the economic crisis, Help the Persecuted is feeding thousands of people in desperate need, both physically and spiritually. In April this year, the charity opened this 3-acre farm called Seeds of Hope that now distributes up to 39 truckloads of produce each month. The farm is run by local pastor Amal, who explains why these food supplies are so vital, particularly for persecuted Christian converts, who are often the last to receive any kind of humanitarian aid.
In fact, here in Lebanon, because of the economic collapsing, all the people, they are in need, especially the persecuted people. They don't have the vegetable to eat. The vegetables are very expensive now. And also, there is disease called cholera because of the vegetables. Some farms, they use the unclean water to watering the plants. So in our project, we use the well water from the well. It's very clean water.
He went on to explain how this feeding ministry also serves as a bridge to reach the Muslim community, including through their regular community meals.
This project is kind of building bridges between the community and make relationship with the people, and have also the Muslim, they begin to say, because in Islamic way, it's forbidden to love the non-Muslim. You cannot love them. They find that this is a strange project because we are helping lots of people. Sometimes, yes, of course, we are focusing on the persecuted people, but sometimes we help some vulnerable Muslim also. And of course, we use the distributing vegetables to preach the gospel for them, to give them the message of the gospel.
Help the Persecuted CEO Joshua Yousef is inspired by the spiritual impact this project is having as they look at the whole person.
They are physically hungry. We know they're spiritually hungry, but they're physically hungry. And in that point, we meet them at their point of need, and we're able to build that currency to share the gospel with them. And so what we're seeing is the Lord is opening the spiritual eyes of Druze, Muslims, some Christians who may have been born into an ethnic Christian home but don't know or have a relationship with Jesus. But that's all happening because we're able to look at the whole person and help the whole person.
And Help the Persecuted is hoping to expand this feeding ministry into many other countries where they work throughout the Middle East. A mobile cafe ministry that provided vital help for those devastated by the Beirut explosion in 2020 continues to feed people in Lebanon with not only great food and coffee, but also the Word of God. Salam, Regional Director for Christian charity Help the Persecuted, explains more about how God used their Search the Book cafe after this disaster and how it continues to impact people today.
This was serving people, supplying them with water, drinking water, coffee, and hot meals. And it was placed in the area that was affected by the explosion. And people were coming, and we were talking to them, sharing with them how we are there, like to help them, and praying with them, listening to their needs. And from there started everything. We started going to their houses, fixing their windows, doors, kitchens that were demolished. After the explosion we helped, and everything was finished and it's over. We moved to the mountain of Lebanon, and we placed this on the corner of the highway here, where people can stop, have a cup of coffee. There's a lot of Christian literature that's offered for free, and if they want to get any book or the Bible, they can ask for it. It's there in the case. They can see it and they'll ask for it. And Christians here can share with them the gospel and the good news.
And Help the Persecuted hopes to open several Search the Book cafes throughout the region so that they can feed many more people, both practically and spiritually. And to find out more, go to htp.org.
And I personally love a good coffee, so it's not only great to have a good coffee, but also to be able to share the gospel in Lebanon as well, as an extra bonus. Tim, I love those two videos. I love the farm with Seeds of Hope, and I love the project with the coffee shop and sharing the gospel and stuff as well. And just share with us how this has really had a huge impact on those that work on the farm and those who work on the coffee shops, and the difference it's been able to make amongst those local communities nearby.
Well, I think firstly, the persecuted Christians that we've helped, we called on them to actually help us to build the farm. And there was actually 11 huge, as you saw the size of them, huge polytunnels producing food. And when I went last year, they were able to be self-sufficient. So, so you're, on the one hand, they can feed their families, they can actually sell the produce to sustain their lifestyle, and to be self-sufficient. But also, more importantly, as we heard, is that it becomes a seed for the local community. And that local community where we're growing is actually made up of Muslims and Druze. And when I was out there last year with Josh and some of the team, last July, we fed the local community and gave out 450 meals.
Wow.
You know, and that is something, you know, to do that. And they do that once a month. You know. So through that, they're able to, again, share through a different medium, through the farm, through food, because they're all starving, you know, and that seems to cut across the religious barriers with the Druze and the Muslims. You know, to be fed by Christians and to be looked after, you know, and we have to do that first. So it's had a huge impact, and as Josh said, you know, with up to 30 to 35 truckloads a month, that's been taken down into Beirut, where we have a kitchen, and then we can feed those that actually can't get out of their homes, that are starving, you know, and those that can actually come to the kitchen and actually be fed and actually hear the gospel. And so it's another way of being able to reach people with the gospel, which is so desperate in a nation which wasn't that long ago. That was called the Paris of the Middle East. And now it's a failing country, as we've heard, and there's so much going on. But that's one of the ways. And with the bookshop, you know, again, we can give out coffee. And the Arabic coffee is a little bit different than the strong coffee we like over here.
Very strong, yeah.
You know, it's very, very strong, you know. And I think you'd be high for the rest of the day if you have one of those. But yeah, so they can go and have coffee and a snack to eat, and then they can share with them, you know, the books that they have, and they can take one away if they want to. And many people have come to know the Lord through that. So it's mobile, it can be taken around, and we might have some more of those being, you know, springing up in various places. Yeah.
Sounds like a great idea.
Mm.
And Joshua, share with us the religious dynamics regarding this, that Christians would be considered like infidels on behalf of Muslims, and there we have Christians actually keeping the kind of Muslim communities alive through this wonderful project that is Seeds for Hope. Share with us how that then breaks down misconceptions, particularly in Lebanon. I know that Lebanon, for example, is one of the multicultural nations across the Middle East, and it wasn't that long ago that Lebanon was a Christian nation run by the Maronites. So share with us how that change of thinking is taking place because of the way that the Christians been able to serve their fellow Muslims in their community.
Yeah, there's no question that the humanitarian work that we do does bridge gaps. And there's an openness on the part of people who need help. When, like in the Druze community, for instance, we have seen where people start converting in larger numbers and they get excited about Jesus. Some of those at the top start to kind of question the bookshop and the coffee shop and the motives and things. So that it can be one of those things that we have to be mindful of. And so yeah, sometimes there does become a fractious part of that relationship when people start converting. You know, particularly when there's a crisis, people will allow anything during a crisis. But when things start to level off, and that you know, they'll start to target us a little bit more. So we do have to be very careful with our team.
And I mean, Tim, it's so important, isn't it, and so encouraging to know that humanitarian aid is provided for some of these Christians, and then these Christians are then very much showing that gospel message of showing the others through practical love and providing with food and stuff as well. And I'm sure that many of those people that feel they're on the brink of starvation realise then they're giving kind of you know, weekly food supplies, that this must have a huge impact on the way that they view Christians and actually probably experience real love in the first time in their life.
I think love is it. You know, it's showing love, you know, across political and religious boundaries. And that's first and foremost, and go back to where would Jesus be? You know, that's where he would be, ministering to them. And that's what we see in the Bible stories. You know, so it has a huge impact. But, you know, as Josh said, we have to be mindful as well, not to upset communities through this, but allow them just to experience over time the love that we can share, that we can be that Jesus comes through the team, you know, and it's so important to recognise, should I say, that the teams go out and they put their lives on the line. You know, they have families as well, but they're bold. You know, they go out, but they're also very, very sensitive. But because they speak the language, they're local. You know, it's so important to have the indigenous people in our teams that go out there, and that's key. You know, if I went out there, it'd be very different. You know, although we went as just a kind of one-off, but we're not doing that all the time. We went as to help the persecuted, you know, worldwide team, you know, to go over there. But it's the local teams that really have the impact, that see the significant changes in the lives of those that need the gospel, and they desperately need the gospel.
Absolutely. One thing I love about what you're doing with your ministry, Help the Persecuted, Joshua, is the incredible equipping of believers to have their own businesses and to be self-sufficient and to give something back to their own communities. Do you want to unpack this incredible initiative that you've got going of helping to provide jobs for believers? And a case in point would be Iraq.
We have a phrase that we use as a team called civic death. So when someone comes to Christ and the community or family persecute them, they basically say, no more job, you can't work, we're taking your money, we're taking your inheritance until you come back to Islam. So we started something called enduring livelihood. We want these people to flourish. We want them to flourish in running their business or working for a business that will allow them to flourish. And so that's what this Enduring Livelihood program is all about.
Amazing. So let's have a look at this incredible project called Enduring Livelihood and the difference that it is making, particularly in the lives of believers in Iraq.
When persecuted Iraqi Christian Namir was forced to flee ISIS in Mosul, he struggled to make a living to support his family when they were displaced in Erbil in the north of the country. However, thanks to support from Christian charity Help the Persecuted, he was able to start his own car parts shop as part of their Enduring Livelihoods ministry. The charity's Daniel Chwai explains how this business has transformed Namir's life.
He even shared that without your support and without this project, I would have starved to death. And when he said that, and I had the privilege to record him when he said that, he had tears in his eyes. And he told me that without you, I cannot survive. You gave me my dream back. You gave me my life back. And you gave my family hope.
And Namir had this message of thanks for the help he's received.
أكيد أنه الرب ما خلاني أنه لوحدي نهائيا ولا عافني للحظة واحدة. أكيد كان معي وكل خطوة.
Help the Persecuted has now helped start up and run more than 190 businesses for more than 1,000 believers in countries hostile to the gospel, including Syria, Iraq and Iran, providing them with long-term sustainable incomes. Imad is one of the many examples of how this ministry has enabled their businesses to thrive.
نتسلى بيها نشتغل بيها نعيش جهلنا من وراها.
وشو سبب الضحكة؟
والله بنعمة الرب رتب لنا.
And Help the Persecuted plans to expand their Enduring Livelihoods ministry into more countries so many others like Namir and Ahmad can have a hope and a sustainable future. And to find out more, go to htp.org.
Such an incredible project there by Help the Persecuted to actually provide living and resources and job opportunities for believers in those war-torn countries like Iraq. And we pray that would just spread across the region. Tim, I love stories, and I know our viewers will love stories as well. Share with us this Jonah-type story that took place. You only found out about it very, very last week, I believe.
Well, it was this week. It was on Tuesday. We have a call between the Middle East and America and the US, and the UK, and basically this story came out of it, and we were just like, wow. And we have this team in Lebanon called Pastoral Care Team, and they've been seeing some miracles over there, and this one in particular was of a guy called Mohammed. He was fleeing Syria to Lebanon, and he decided to go by boat, and there was an accident, and we don't quite know the details around that, but he ended up in the sea. The boat sank, and he was floating around in the sea for about 3 or 4 hours, you know, losing hope, feeling very faint. And he just cried out to the Lord, and he just said, Lord, I don't know you, but save me. You know, and then basically that was virtually it. And next thing you know, he's just about to give up, and this fishing boat comes by, and these fishermen yank him out of the water, you know, and take him ashore, and they take him straight to hospital. And like when he woke, he realised that he had been saved, that God had heard his cry, you know, and he just said, Lord, he said, I want to know you. You know, and after that, the pastoral care team were able to pray with him. He gave his life to the Lord, and so did the rest of his family. You know, and that's really all we know at the moment. But there's stories like this, there's miracles that are happening on a day-to-day basis that the teams are witnessing. And this was one that I know Josh, he said, you know, it reminds me of the story of Jonah. You know, being shipwrecked, you know, and then getting rescued and having to, like I said at the beginning, go to Nineveh, really, to share the gospel, which he didn't want to do. But this is a guy that really cried out. And it's amazing because it just shows that the Lord is there all the time. You know, when someone calls on his name, you know, he will come, and he rescued him.
Amazing, amazing. Joshua, I'll let you say a message to our viewers about how they can support and get behind the incredible work that you guys are doing at Help the Persecuted, because I mean, it's just incredible to see what God is doing in the Middle East, but also the way that he's using your ministry, Help the Persecuted, to make such a difference and to bring the gospel, but to bring humanitarian aid and to make a massive difference in the lives of, well, 74,000 people. Impressive stuff.
Listen, the Lord is doing great things through our ministry, and whether it's pastoral care, whether it's enduring livelihood, whether it is you know, our safe house ministry or evacuation of Christians from Afghanistan, God is really using Help the Persecuted in a very a specific way. And so my hope and prayer for the church in the West, Christians in the West, is that we would come alongside these people in prayer, and also that our own faith would be encouraged by their faith and their perseverance, that the church in the West, which is so apt to give up and give in to things, would be encouraged to persevere as well. And so that is our hope for the church in the West, that they would see the perseverance of the church in the East, and that they would mirror that as well as come alongside and support them in their weakness. It's a different kind of weakness, but it's a resource weakness. And so that's our hope and prayer for the church in the West.
And Tim, for our viewers, for our UK audience watching this programme, how important is it that they get behind Help the Persecuted, and how can they practically and also spiritually get involved in the ministry by praying for you guys, but also helping, you know, give money to the organisation and just get involved in this incredible initiative?
Well, as you've seen, you know, through the stories today, it's vitally important, and how we've grown from, you know, 48,000 people that we've rescued and helped to over 74,000, and that is only by the help and support that you give us. And so we're so grateful, you know, and on behalf of all the persecuted Christians, we can say that as well, that they are eternally grateful for your support and your help. But more importantly as well, your prayers. So you can visit our website, htb.org. There's a donate button on there. You can donate. directly on there, but there's also, you can sign up to our weekly prayer email that comes out from Josh, in actual fact. It normally comes out on a Thursday. It'll give you an update of what is happening in the field. So you will hear about these stories. You will hear about these people that we're saving and the enduring livelihoods. So you'll be, you'll hear it up to date when they come out, and you can pray into that, because prayer is so vitally important.
Tim and Joshua, thank you so much for sharing what God is doing in the Middle East through Help the Persecuted. It's been incredible. And I just want to thank you for watching this program. Continue to pray and support the work of Help the Persecuted. And let's have a look at the overview of Help the Persecuted and the incredible work they're doing in the Middle East today.
Over the past year, we've made a profound difference in the lives of over 50,000 persecuted Christians in the Muslim world, providing humanitarian and spiritual support to those in crisis, from urgent lightning funds to meet immediate needs, safe housing, food, medical care, discipleship with biblical encouragement and hope embedded throughout. We responded immediately when a massive earthquake devastated the Syria-Turkey border, bringing in winter relief supplies, shelter, food and pastoral care to those who lost everything. Our team is still on the ground in northern Syria, meeting the ongoing needs of persecuted and vulnerable Christians most impacted by the earthquake, providing food and hygiene kits, home repairs and gospel outreach programs to children in need. In Lebanon, we launched a crisis response to meet the many needs of persecuted Christians in the wake of total economic collapse. You've helped us reach over 24,000 people through a large vegetable farm, providing fresh produce and employment opportunities, emergency relief kits containing non-perishable foods and necessities, vital medical care for those in need of medicine and doctor's visits, and ongoing pastoral care and discipleship. Help the Persecuted CEO Joshua Yousef also shares more about our crisis response to people in desperate need in Lebanon.
We provide a lot of over 30 truckloads of fruit and veg a month. At the same time, we have relief efforts through a kitchen that we have a partnership with a kitchen in Beirut that prepares hot meals for particularly those that are at great risk, either the elderly or invalid or people who cannot work.
Joshua says we've also helped over 230 people to start small businesses through our Enduring Livelihood program, which enables persecuted Christians to thrive economically.
We come in with the necessary means to support a person in the creation of a business plan, in financial support of establishing that business. It's an amazing thing when you consider over 70% of those businesses that we've done over the last 5 years are still in existence and cash flow positive today. And they not only provide jobs for that individual or that individual's family, but then that convert can then employ other converts who have lost their job as a result of their faith.
We have no plans to stop or slow down. In fact, as persecution escalates in the areas we serve, we're ramping up our efforts to do more and reach more.